من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, I hope everybody's doing well and we are, we're still steadfast in our fasting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your Ahmad, your salat, and most importantly your fast as well. Last day, my brothers and sisters, we spoke about the existence of God under the title, Who Are We Searching For? Right? Because we said before that we have to search for the truth. And so we said, for us to know the ultimate truth, we have to know the origin. For us to know why we are here and where we are going, those questions are answered once we answer the fundamental question of where did we come from? And to answer where we came from is to answer what is the source of the universe, what is our source, what created us, and ultimately, proving the existence of God. And once we proved the existence of God, it became clear that we have a goal in this life because this God is all perfect. This God is wise. This God is all-knowing. This God does not act for no reason. He or it, we say he just to refer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the aqil, in the intellectual pronouns that we have. Instead of using it, we use he just to refer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is wise when he acts and does not do anything for no reason. And so we know there's a reason for us to be here. Tayyib, does that goal diminish when we die? Or do we see the fruit of that goal after death? No, it makes sense that after death there has to be something more. And there's much more proofs and what's much more deeper than just that. But this is just on the surface. But we knew all of this stuff. These things became clear after we proved the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jameel. Now that we know that God exists, are we done? No, because even in our sharia, our deen, our religion is made up of two components. It's made up of the component of belief, aqidah, aqaid, and then it's made up of the component of al-sharia, al-fiqh, jurisprudence, the laws. Meaning, to this belief, there's a practical aspect directly linked to it. That practical aspect is what we call worship. Or a big faction of the practical aspect is what we call worship. What directly sprouts from our belief in a God is an act. That act is what we call worship. Jameel. What's the connection between the two? As in, why do you worship God? Is it knowing Him enough? Is it knowing God and knowing that He exists and He's the one who created you enough? Why do you worship Him? Why is that belief translated into worship? Why is it translated into action? This question, my brothers and sisters, also comes off as purely argumental. Just from an argumental place. Just, you want to argue, you want to ask. But it also has a fruit to it. And it's a discussion between different religions. There are religions out there that believe in manifesting your belief in your actions in the outside world through worship, through sacrifice, through etc., etc., etc. Through different means of manifestation. Then there are religions that know, like some Sufi sects, some extreme Sufi sects, or extremely liberal, I would say. Sufi sects that believe your belief is merely in your heart. You don't have to make that external. You don't have to manifest it in any way. Live your life according to what is good and bad and what's commonly known as good and bad. Don't hurt others and have your belief to yourself. And not just Muslims. There are non-Muslims that have this very same way of doing things. And religions that preach this ideology. Be good to others, be good to yourself. What is commonly known as goodness. And your belief is merely your belief. And what you believe about God is enough. If you believe that God exists or this being exists, If Buddha exists, for example, if a Hindu god exists, whatever it may be, whatever your belief system is, whatever the belief is according to that religion, if you have that belief, then you are saved. If you don't act on that belief, then it's not going to be a problem. It's okay. So the discussion about manifesting your belief in some sort of practical way is a big discussion between religions. But as we said, sometimes the fundamentals of our religion are not clear to us. And that's why we're discussing these questions. That's why I'm posing the question to you now. Why do you worship? What drives you to worship? Is it merely tradition? And honestly ask yourself now. Let me ask myself, and let's be honest with ourselves. Let's be honest with ourselves. The riwayah says, judge yourself. The meaning of the riwayah, obviously, because I'm fasting. The meaning of the riwayah is, judge yourself before you're judged. Let's be honest. Let's think of it between us, me and you right now. Let's think out loud. Why do you worship God? Why do you worship? Is it merely tradition? Is it merely cultural? If you were not born in the family that you were born in, would you be as religious as you are, practically speaking? Practically speaking. Not the belief aspect. Practically. If your mother or father at such a young age didn't teach you to pray, didn't teach you to fast, would you do them? If your mother or father didn't tell you to wear the hijab, for example, for the sisters, and also for the brothers, if your father and mother did not tell you to observe your specific type of hijab, would you do it? These are questions that we don't tend to ask ourselves sometimes. But they are the most fundamental questions. And they are the most important questions. So tonight, my brothers and sisters, in this brief lecture, we want to answer this question. Why do you worship? Why do you worship God? Why? Why does this belief manifest itself into some sort of action? Jameel. We will begin, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. Before we actually answer the question head on, let's first define worship. Let's put the definitions down. There's no use in talking about a subject if the terms themselves are still vague. What does it mean to worship? What does it mean to worship? And by the way, just like religion itself has many, many different definitions. And it's almost subjective in what is defined as, where you define as something and I define as something totally different. Worship is just the same way. Many people define worship in many, many different ways. Many, many different ways. So what is worship? What is worship? Well, you can come down and narrow the definitions down and say, well, all of you are pretty much saying this. Worship is defined as two things coming together. Worship has two conditions. Number one, it's the act of humiliating yourself, paying respect, showing humility towards something or someone. That's one condition, showing humility. Two, with the belief that this thing that you're humiliating yourself to, paying your respect to, is the source of benefit and harm. Two conditions. Humiliating yourself to something or someone. Paying the respect, humbling yourself, number one. Number two, with the belief that this thing holds benefit and harm. Is the source of benefit and harm for you. And we're not talking any source of benefit and harm. We're talking the ultimate source of benefit and harm. The ultimate source of benefit and harm. Where benefit and harm are in its hands only. And if anyone is able to benefit you or harm you, it is because they ultimately got the energy, the power, the ability to do so from this being that you are worshipping. Jameel. This definition puts down these two conditions, and it excludes, for example, the parents that you would humble yourself to. You kiss your mother's hand. You kiss your father's feet, for example. You respect them, but you don't believe that they are the source of benefit and harm. You don't believe that they are the source of benefit and harm. And also excludes those who believe in their hearts but don't act. Because why? They believe that this being holds benefit and harm, but they don't humble themselves to that being in any sort of action. Those two conditions coming together draw the perfect picture of what worship actually means. And that's why we say in mantiq and logic, we say the definition has to be what we call jami' mani'. Means the definition must exclude all those that don't pretty much fall under that definition. They're not included in the circle of that definition. And it must bring in all actions that comprise this definition itself. Right? And this definition truly does this. طيب. Now we understand the meaning of worship. طيب. Now that we understand the meaning of worship, we can ask the question. What's the connection between belief and worship? Why do you worship? And why does belief seem to bring about worship? Why does belief seem to bring about worship? To understand this, we must make clear a few points. We must make clear this point here. Please listen, please pay attention. Every single action that you do and I do, in one perspective, it symbolizes something, and in another perspective, from another perspective, it brings about something. Every action symbolizes something and also brings about an effect or something in the outside world. So it acts as a symbol and it acts as a cause to some sort of effect in the outside world. I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to say. When you go to school, the act of studying symbolizes something, and it also has an effect in the outside world. What's it symbolize? Well, it symbolizes your passion for knowledge. It symbolizes your importance, how you view knowledge, and your belief about the importance of knowledge. That's what it symbolizes. Your value of knowledge when you study hard. So what's the effect of studying? Well, you gain knowledge and you get that degree, and then ultimately you're able to get a job and provide for your family. Yes? These are the effects of the action. But what does the action symbolize? What does the action indicate? Oh, that's a good word to use. Indicate. What does that action indicate? It indicates your passion. It indicates what you consider to be important in life. It symbolizes how you value your time and what you consider valuable enough to fill your time with. This is what it indicates. Jameel. Take that same logic and apply it to worship. Ask, what does worship symbolize? And what are the effects of worship? What does worship symbolize? And what are the effects of worship? First and foremost, what does it symbolize? The first thing that worship symbolizes is giving thanks. Giving thanks. You have a belief. Why does that belief bring about action? Because worship itself, as in, why does belief bring about worship? Because worship itself is the embodiment, rather the meaning of giving thanks to the one that has given you everything that you have. Worship is a means by which you give gratitude, and I give gratitude, show gratitude to the being that has given me everything that I have and everything that I own. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to create me when I had absolutely nothing on God to make Him create me. There was nothing obliging God to take me out of the realm of nothingness, if you can even call it that, into the realm of existence, and then bring me into this world and shower me with the blessings that He has showered me with. Put a roof over my head, put food on the table, gave me loving parents, a family, a place to stay, peace, has given me everything. But most importantly, has given me the knowledge of Himself, has told me that He exists, has put inside of me the innate belief in His existence, has made me know Him, given me the honor of knowing God. Worship is manifesting that thanks, my brothers and sisters. And a lot of us, my brothers and sisters, when we worship, we totally veer away. We totally veer away from this idea of giving thanks. It's robotic to us. It's robotic. Just do the actions and get over with it. Yalla khalas, it's done. We totally veer away from this idea that when I pray, it is not merely a routine. Rather, it's a means to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what He has given me and you. That's why the hadith comes and says the worshippers are not on the same level. They're at different levels. There are levels to the worshippers. The first level, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, there are those that will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of fear of hell. And that is the worship of the slave. And then there are those that will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of desire for heaven. And that is the worship of the businessman. Give me heaven and I will give you worship. It's a transaction. And then there are those that will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of thanks. And that is the worship of the free man. Free. Not bound by anything. Not bound by anything. Not limited, not restricted by anything. Not restricted by the ideas of hell and heaven. Not restricted by the idea of fear and desire and selfishness. These things don't restrict this person. Rather, he's free of these things. He's free of these things. And that is the level, my brothers and sisters, of a person who has understanding. That is the level of a person with understanding. Remember what we said in the last 2 or 3 lectures. What did we say? We said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala values our worship in accordance to the ma'rifah, the understanding that we have. Understanding that we have. That's why we're going back to the fundamentals. To get that understanding and allow it to grow. Allow that understanding to grow. And that's why, my brothers and sisters, that's why Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salamullah, he says, the meaning of the hadith, if Allah didn't create heaven and didn't create hell, it would have been obligatory and mandatory on me and you to worship and obey. And obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still. And wallahu al-alim, wallahu al-alim. He says, because of what He has given you and showered you with. When we start to look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this scope, in this lens, through this scope and through this lens, we see Allah ta'ala and our worship in a different light. We see the sacrifices we make for Allah ta'ala in a different light. We start to see the sin in a very, very, very different light. Why? Because if our entire lives become merely worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they revolve around the worship of God. Because the meaning of worship has become so clear for us, then us transgressing against God becomes that much harder. Because we found it in ourselves morally to go back and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not going to turn around and spit in the face of God. Wal-'iyadh billah. spit in the face of God, yes, when we sin, because that's essentially what a sin is. That's essentially what a sin is. Look at this riwayah. Look at this riwayah, and I'll prove to you that there's a direct connection here. Listen. عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام عن الصادق قال أوحى الله عز وجل إلى موسى. God revealed to Musa. He said, يا موسى اشكرني حق شكري. So that's what worship symbolizes, my brothers and sisters. It symbolizes thanks. Giving thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Showing gratitude to the being that has given you everything, given me everything. Like, what is the effect now? What is worship the cause of? What is worship the cause of? Well, worship, my brothers and sisters, as we said, is connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a means of obedience. And we defined worship as what? Act of humility with the belief that this being holds benefit and harm. So me and you, when we worship, we connect to the being that ultimately holds what is beneficial and harmful to me. So the direct effect, therefore, must be Allah, God, pushing away harm from me and me taking from God what is ultimately beneficial for me. That's why we say the wajibat, the obligatory actions on us, the mandatory actions on us, they are only mandatory on us because of the benefit that they hold. We say there are 5 ahkam. There are 5 groups of rulings. We have wajib, mustahab, mubah, makruh, and haram. طيب, why was eating pig haram while salat was wajib? Why? Was it just because God wrote it down and said, this is what I want it to be and that's it? Well, there's more to it than that. We believe that embedded in each and every one of these actions, there is benefit or harm depending on the ruling it was given. Salat, for example, having so much benefit that you're not able to leave it. Like, for example, breathing. Breathing holds so much benefit to you as a human being that by leaving it, you're, number one, considered to be illogical in your decision, and number two, it will bring about so much harm that the logical human being says you must do it. You must breathe. For example, a mustahab action. A mustahab action would be exercising. An action that holds benefit, that brings about benefit, but that benefit is not to such a degree where the logical person says you must do it. And if you don't do it, there's going to be a lot of harm that comes your way. Harm that you cannot have in your life. Harm that is too much. Harm that's illogical to bear. Then mubah. Mubah is either where the benefit and the harm equal, or there isn't necessarily benefit or harm linked to the action itself, like taking a walk, like just walking, like just sitting, right? Nothing is connected to it in terms of benefit and harm. Nothing is connected to it directly. Indirectly maybe, but directly no. Makruh, opposite of mustahab. There's harm in it, but the harm is not to such a degree where if you do it, the logical person says you're bringing about so much harm that it's not normal for a person to bear. It's not right for the person to bear. Like, for example, eating fatty foods or oily foods. It's harmful. Or smoking. For those that consider smoking not to be, to that level of harm, there's a difference of opinion. But eating oily foods, fatty foods, that's a perfect example. It's harmful. But does the logical person look at you and say, that's the same thing as eating poison? Because it will kill you right then and there? No. So it's like makruh. Haram is like eating poison. It's so harmful that the logical person says, no, that's too much. That's too much. That's on a level that logically you should not be putting yourself through that harm. You should not be bringing about that harm. Right? When it comes to our wajibat, they are based on the idea of benefit and harm. And the level, the degree of harm versus the level and the degree of benefit. Level of harm and the level of benefit. When it comes to worship, my brothers and sisters, you see that connection. Worship is connecting with the being that holds the essence of harm and benefit. Therefore, the direct effect of that action is benefit in pushing away harm. And benefit that you must have. Like, why must you have that benefit? Why can't we say that it's good to worship but you don't have to? Because human beings, my brothers and sisters, are not merely physical beings. Rather, we have a spiritual component, and feeding that spiritual component is by connecting to the spiritual realm. Connecting to the being that holds your spiritual well-being, just the same way that he holds your physical well-being. Now you tell me, what's the proof? What's the proof that human beings are spiritual? I tell you, my brothers and sisters, I tell you that there's two proofs that I'll present to you today. Number one is anthropological. Anthropological. Go through history. Go through the history of human beings. And you will find that every culture, every tradition, every civilization had some sort of connection with the spiritual realm. If it was merely coincidental that today people find themselves spiritual, or if it's merely coincidental that you as a person find yourself spiritual, then why is it that every single tradition, every single civilization, the vast majority, for accuracy purposes, vast majority of civilizations and people throughout human history, had some sort of spiritual connection, a connection to the spiritual realm, a belief of some sort. And here I'll quote for you a paper that was published by Dr. Ben Dead of the University of Pennsylvania. Look what he says. He says, Peterson and Sleeman observed that spirituality is universal by saying, when they said, although the specific content of spiritual beliefs varies, all cultures have a specific concept of an ultimate, transcendent, sacred, and divine force. You find it's human nature. No matter the bias, no matter the external influence, human beings naturally gravitate towards the spiritual realm and feel that they are not merely physical. There's something more to it. That's number one. Number two, statistics. Look at this statistic. According to a study, 70% of spiritual and religious people reported being very or completely satisfied with their life, compared to just 47% that were neither spiritual nor religious. Where it's embedded in our human nature. Obviously, the first proof is much stronger than the second proof, because then you can say that's circumstantial, etc., etc., etc. But the first proof, that's anthropological evidence. That is a clear indication, my brothers and sisters, that human beings desire that spiritual ascension, my brothers and sisters, and innately know within themselves that there is a being out there called God. That's why a man comes to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he says to him, prove to me the existence of God. So the Imam says to him, and what do you work? What do you do for a living? He says, I'm a sailor. I'm a fisherman. So the Imam alayhi salam said, have you ever been at sea once and something happened, an accident happened, you lost your boat? The sailor said yes. Has it happened where you were in the middle of the ocean, middle of the water? You looked around and there was no one around you to help you. And at that moment in time, when you felt that the world, the physical world, has abandoned you, your heart naturally connected to something out there. Something out there that you knew can save you from the predicament that you were in. The man said yes. The Imam alayhi salam said, that's God. You know He exists. In you, within you, you desire to connect with His realm, the spiritual realm, the realm of the unseen. Innately you desire to do so. And that innate desire is enough of a connection between belief and worship. It's enough of a connection where the value of belief only gets its real value from the action that it brings about. And that innate desire to manifest what you believe is enough to prompt any human being to stand on their prayer mat. To stand on their prayer mat, my brothers and sisters. So why do you worship? Simply speaking, because worship symbolizes thanks to a Lord, to a being that has given me everything. And it also, the effect of that also brings about what is ultimately beneficial for me as a human being, for the composition that I'm made up of, the spiritual side of me and the physical side. The same way that I eat breakfast or lunch or dinner, I get nutrition from the food that I eat and I feed my physical body. The soul needs that same nourishment. And that is the worship, my brothers and sisters. That's why the riwayah says, the famous hadith, what does it say? As-salat ma'rajul mu'min. Salat is the ascension of the believer, where the believer's soul ascends to the spiritual realm that they long for. And that's why the hadith says, you were not created for this world. You were created for Jannah. You were not created for this world. You were created for another world. This is merely a place where you plant your seeds to harvest later on. When we start to look at the world in this way, when we start to look at worship in this way, we see it in a totally different light. And the value of worship becomes so much more in our eyes. And then the intention behind that worship also becomes different, more complete, and ultimately more sincere. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم أسأله تعالى أن يعفو عنا ويغفر لنا ويرحمنا إنه نعم المولى ونعم النصير وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد